Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to give folks a couple minutes to join us and get settled. Thanks for being here. Welcome, everyone. Just so folks know, we are live streaming over on our Every Child NC Facebook page. And we know everyone is incredibly busy this week. So we appreciate you taking the time for this important conversation. We'll be getting going in just one moment. Welcome, everyone. We had almost 200 people register for this important conversation. So we want to make sure we just give a moment to allow folks to join and get settled in. And we are so excited to be welcoming our incredible panelists. We'll be starting things off in just a moment. Just going to give another moment or so for folks to settle in. Welcome, welcome, everyone. We'll be starting the program in just a moment. All right, I think we're ready to go ahead and kick things off. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us. I'm Sarah Montgomery, and I work with the Education and Law Project at the North Carolina Justice Center. And I'm also the proud co-chair, along with my colleague Letha Mohammed, who's the executive director at Education Justice Alliance. And together we are co-chairs in the Every Child NC Coalition. Together with the Justice Center, who has been fighting for Leandro for decades. Every Child NC started as the movement designed to lead the statewide fight for equitable school funding. And we use Leandro as a way to organize and mobilize our community. We are proud hosts today of this important conversation. We're going to hear and learn from some incredible leaders who really represent what the case, what Leandro is all about. And their advocacy is an incredible model for all of us, all of the advocates who care deeply about this issue. We are going to have a really rich conversation. We ask if everyone can save your questions until towards the end of the program, where we'll have time to field some questions, and you can go ahead and use the Q&A feature, or if you prefer, it's easier, just go ahead and put your question in the chat. We just ask that you do that towards the end of the program. We also have closed caption enabled, so for folks who want to access that, you can do so on your Zoom controls. So it is my pleasure to hand things over to today's moderator, the Executive Director of North Carolina Justice Center and longtime leader in Leandro, Rick Glazier. Go ahead, Rick.
Thanks very much, Sarah, and welcome everyone. And we are going to have a rich discussion with some tremendous leaders today. And in the week before the historic week that we've been aiming for many years, at the Supreme Court to hear the Leandro case and decide whether the comprehensive remedy is one that the legislature must go ahead and fund. Which is set for next Wednesday at 9:30 in the morning, if I recall, is when the argument is scheduled for. So leading us into that, I'm going to introduce again myself as the Executive Director of the Justice Center, but I have a long history in the Leandro litigation in that I served on the Cumberland County School Board in the 1990s, right after Leandro was filed. And Cumberland County, along with Hoke County and three other counties, were the lead plaintiff counties in the Leandro lawsuit, and helping fund that lawsuit. And then I spent a number of years at the legislature where I was on the Education Policy and Education Appropriations Committees in the first and early part of the second decade of the 2000s, and then had the privilege most recently of being on the Governor's Leandro Commission, which was designed to move this comprehensive remedial plan forward, and I think has been successful in getting it to the point that it's now at the court. So that's my background. I happen to think that Leandro is the most important constitutional decision that the court will issue in many decades. And it is clearly the most important decision for education and the education not only of the children of the current generation, but for generations to come, that this court may ever issue. And part of this decision, I think, will be how justices vote, very much a part of their historic legacy of their commitment to the constitutional provision that provides for a sound basic education for all North Carolinians. With that, I'm going to turn it over and ask each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves and their background as it relates to Leandro, and then we'll get right into the discussion. So Matt, if you would go first in introducing yourself, please.
Sure, thanks, Rick. Pleasure to be here. My name is Matt Ellinwood. I'm also with the North Carolina Justice Center. I'm with the Education and Law Project. Whenever I think I've been working at the Justice Center for over about 12 years now, and whenever I think I've been working on this for a long time, it's nice to be on a panel like this because I'm just a baby in Leandro years. This thing has been going on for so long, and pleasure to be with some of the folks who have been in this fight for far longer. And it's one that I don't think will end even with this version of what's happening at the Supreme Court. So the organizing work that Sarah described around the coalition is incredibly important about what's going to happen going forward, regardless of how things happen with this version of the case. But I think one of the things we were asked to talk about was why we were interested in working on Leandro. And I think Rick really did a good job of covering the reasons why it's so incredibly important. I've always thought that having adequate and equitably distributed resources is a prerequisite to having a healthy education system in general for a state, and that the state really does play this role that a lot of people don't understand. I think most people, when they have an issue with their school, they might go to their teacher or their principal, maybe their school board or county commissioners, but I don't think people fully understand. It's understandable the role that the state plays when you see the lack of resources you may have in a given school, where you don't have nurses who are there every year, or you don't have teaching assistants in the classrooms. There are teachers teaching remotely in multiple schools within a district because we lack certified personnel. Those issues all have come from the state, and that's why the state has such a strong constitutional provision, is because it's not something that's optional or can be backed off of. But again, I just can't overstate how important I think it is this what happens in this case. But the reason why I'm particularly grateful to get to work on it from the perspective of a place like the Justice Center is because the strategies we have really come together perfectly around this issue. We work on communications, litigation, legislative advocacy. We have really strong research. Chris Nordstrom is on this event, who used to work at the Fiscal Research Division at the General Assembly, which has just been incredibly helpful because so much of this case does involve how resources come from the state in our education funding model, and it's quite complex, and grateful that we have that level of support. I also think another difficulty in the case throughout its history has been the actual communities, geographic communities that Rick mentioned, especially in the eastern part of the state, as well as communities and groups of students who are historically marginalized, particularly students who are living in poverty, regardless of where they may live in the state, multilingual learners and students with disabilities, groups of students who have been identified in the case as at risk and having had their constitutional rights most violated by the unconstitutional system. Those people who are actually most impacted and who work most closely with those who are most impacted have not really had a seat at the table in the case historically. We also have never gotten to the point we are right now, which I think is particularly exciting, where we have a plan. The comprehensive remedial plan in the case is the first time we've had a real plan that is truly comprehensive about how we're going to meet the needs of all students in the state. That's been really exciting. And then I think doing that community engagement work alongside of that process was perfect because we got to have some input into how those recommendations were created. And we also were able to say, go to people who are actually working in these communities and work more closely with students and families who are at risk and say, would this plan actually do anything? Would this plan address some of the problems that you're seeing in schools as somebody who's closest to these problems and has the best idea of how to meet the students' needs that you work with every day? And it was amazing over the last few years to have that answer come back as such a resounding yes, and to see the amount of energy there is for doing something in this case, for the court, finally remedying this constitutional violation that a lot of people who are part of the coalition have seen what the effects are firsthand, and we'll hear about that during this panel discussion. But it's just been amazing to be able to get to play that role of being involved in the case. We wrote an amicus brief that talks about some of these issues that I just talked about, the research on how the plan would help, and the experiences of the coalition, why we believe that this plan would actually really meet the needs of children. So just having that all come together in one place, it's just been such a privilege to get to do that and get to meet people like Jackie, who I'm going to pass it to now. I remember I met Jackie at a public education event in Hoke. She said, "Oh, Matt, we're going to be good friends," because I think she knew this wasn't going anywhere as much as we wanted a resolution. I think she's more aware than anybody that this is something that we need to be organized as a large group and speak in one voice. And that's what we did through the amicus brief with over 140 organizations signing on support. I think we've heard that might be the most of any school finance brief in the nation, possibly for any kind of amicus brief that's happened even at the North Carolina Supreme Court in general. So to have that level of organizational support and a bunch of other amicus briefs that have come in to show there's this broad alignment of civil rights, business, legal organizations, and people who work directly with children that really does believe that something needs to happen here at this stage in the case. So it's been a pleasure to get to meet folks like Jackie, and I'm excited to listen to her speak. It's always a lot of fun. So I'll pass it over to Jackie Mclean.
Thank you, Matt, for that wonderful introduction. And yes, indeed, I told Matt we're going to be friends. We're definitely going to be friends. But anyway, I am Jackie Mclean. And how I came to be involved with Leandro, first and foremost, is I'm a parent of a student who is an adult now, mom with children. But my child went through the whole county school system, transplant here from New York, but I got involved. And as a parent who was actively engaged and involved, I saw the deficits. I saw the needs in Hoke County, and I saw what was lacking in Hoke County. And I've been on the ground running ever since. In my role here at the high school, I am a student support service student advocate. My defined title would be dropout prevention specialist. And of course, students dropping out of school has a direct correlation to lack of funding, lack of resources, and it also creates an economic strain on a community too. So it is not only important for me to ensure that all of our students receive that high school diploma, but they receive it in such a way that they are actually really, truly ready for college, career, or life choices. And they can't do that without adequate funding to allow them to participate in the level of opportunity and courses and hands-on experiences that I didn't see when my child was attending school here. And historically, Hoke County was, back in the time when Leandro was, the lawsuit was initiated, we were one of the poorest, if not the poorest county in the state of North Carolina. And let me tell you, while we have grown exponentially in Hoke County, we are still amid poverty in our county. And we are still struggling to ensure that every student has access to opportunities in education. And not only that, as a civil rights and social justice advocate by my role as the local branch president of the Hoke County NAACP, these two positions are just meshed together because you can't have one without the other in actuality. As a community organizer, I focus primarily on young people and I mentor young people. And it's so important that we educate our young people. And it's so important that our local government, our state government, and our national government take notice to what is going on within Hoke County, and not just Hoke County, because Leandro was initiated for Hoke County, but as Rick has said, and I'm sure Mr. Thompson, when he comes to, will share that none of our kids were receiving their fair share of an adequate education. But Hoke County, we were really suffering. We were really suffering. And so I became involved, and I've been involved. And since my leadership with the NAACP, I have connected with the Justice Center. I have been with the Justice Center through various initiatives that they have run, particularly when they were running the Education Leadership Institute, which again reminded us of the inadequacies that Hoke County students were receiving and the fact that we were left behind. And it's so important that we are no longer willing to be left behind. I'm no longer willing to be one who just talk the talk. I want to walk the walk. And I encourage everyone who talk the talk to join us and walk in the walk to ensure that our legislators, that the General Assembly understand, while you may never know the brevity of what it does to a child who, one, is denied access to his sound-based education, but understanding coming from a rural community, these kids coming in with a number of other issues that the funding of Leandro can assist with. Teachers, counselors, social workers, nurses. And I think you'll hear from all of us that the same echoing of the same sound is that Leandro has been funded. Well, it hasn't been funded, but Leandro, we won. We won. And all we've been doing and all I've been doing is saying, give us the money. Give us the money. We're not going to go away. We're going to keep coming. Give us the money. You know, there was an old commercial saying that said, where's the beef? Well, we are saying, where's the money? And we want the money. And I'm saying again, we want it and we're not going to go away. I'm Jackie Plain. I'm going to pass it over to my good friend, Mr. Angus Thompson, that he may share with you in his own way. Angus, take it away.
Thanks. I'm unmuted. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, my name is Angus Thompson, and I thought I was the beef, Jackie. Angus, the beef. But anyway, I'm, again, my name is Angus Thompson. I'm the retired and former public defender here in the county. 5 years before Leandro was filed, which was filed in 1994, I was on the school board of the public schools of Robeson County. We had just merged 5 school systems in 1989. And so Leandro was actually the natural progression of school merger for us. My daughter was a plaintiff, is a plaintiff in the lawsuit at the time. She was in the 7th grade. Again, I was on the school board, and my daughter, just like many of the other plaintiffs, were actually, she was not a special needs child. She was gifted in talent. And she was an athlete and liked facilities and resources like other people in the schools liked. You know, when the roof leaks in the school, it leaks on everybody. Look, I'm a graduate of Morehouse College, graduate of North Carolina Central School of Law, and again, retired public defender. I definitely have some skin in the game. My daughter, as I said, was gifted and talented. She lives in Maryland now, original plaintiff, and I was the guardian for my daughter. She has a 3-year-old daughter who has a learning disability. That's my granddaughter, 2 generations removed. And so I definitely have skin in the game. And I just want to say, you know, that to all who are going to be advocates, I always say that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. And now our last panelist, Tamika Walker-Kelly, if you will introduce yourself, Tamika.
I think she's needing to join right back on if you want to go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was just going to say, I think technology is great when it works, but we're in education and we sort of adapt to the moment. So with that, we'll come back to Tamika when she comes back on board. So if I could, and I'm going to pick up on a theme that all of you said, but particularly Jackie, we were talking about the Leandro plan is a comprehensive roadmap and a funding roadmap for meeting the basic minimum constitutional obligations. Well, here's Jackie. I'll hold that question, and here's Tamika, and I'm going to let Tamika introduce herself real quickly in case we lose you again.
Thank you for being patient with all things that happen with technology. My Zoom on my laptop decided to update at the exact moment. And so now I had to switch over to a different laptop. So this is a great way to introduce myself as an educator. We always have to be flexible. My name is Tamika Walker-Kelly. I am an elementary music specialist from Fayetteville, North Carolina, Cumberland County. I'm my 16th year of education, and I am pleased to be the president of the North Carolina Association of Educators, the state's largest professional organization for public school workers all across the state. And so when I think about Leandro, and when we talk about Leandro, I'm thinking about it from 2 vantage points. One, as an educator who works in our public schools across the state, but also as a public school parent, as many of our panelists have mentioned prior to me. And so as a public school educator, we know that Leandro and fully funding our constitutional obligation to every single student across the state could radically transform our public schools for the positive. It could positively impact all of our students across the state. And usually when we talk about Leandro, we do focus on the core counties which filed the lawsuit because it was an equity issue. We know that those students in those low wealth counties did not have the same access and opportunities to resources as their wealthier county counterparts. However, Leandro really provides equity for all students across the state. So even students here in Wake County, even students in Durham and Chapel Hill, particularly students with disabilities, students who speak another language, all of those students will have the benefit of resources. And as a teacher who taught in a school that had a diverse population, racial diversity, ability diversity, all of those things like that, Leandro would provide us with so much more resources, both monetary and tangible, that would allow us to really aspire to the things that we know are true, that every student, when they walk into a North Carolina public school, should have access to the highest quality public education that they deserve. And so when I am engaging with educators and students and parents all across the state, we want that for our students. From, as one of my good friends says, from Murphy to Manteo, every public school should be well funded. And we know that it's not just making sure that we put resources in school. It starts before some of our students even walk into the school building. So we're talking about early childhood all the way to post-secondary education. And so our investment in our students should always be the top priority of our state. They are our youngest citizens, and they are the future of where we want North Carolina to go. And if we do not invest in our students, how do we say that we are really going to change the trajectory of where we want to be as North Carolinians? And so I am excited to be on this panel with such amazing collaborators in this work, as we are all watching what happens in the upcoming week around Leandro. So I will turn it back over to you, Rick.
Thank you, Tamika. And the highlight that you made is that, every generation's greatest legacy is the education of the next generation. And this is all about all of us performing our maintenance obligation for the current and future generations of North Carolina. And we'll be remembered if this happens, and we'll be certainly remembered if it doesn't. But I want to go back to this idea that the comprehensive remedial plan is a policy and funding roadmap of the state over the next 6 to 7 years to meet its constitutional obligations. But it is, as Tamika said, everything from early childhood education all the way through to college. And I wonder if each of you would talk for a minute about what you think is maybe one of the more significant components of that plan as you see it affecting your communities and your work. And Jackie, I want to start with you on this, if you could.
Great. Just as Tamika says, early childhood education, the foundation, the start. And when we give children a great head start, they thrive a whole lot better. And for me, the implementation of early childhood education, opening the doors, no child should really be denied an opportunity to start school early, simply because a parent may work, be employed, or make a few dollars over whatever that assessed amount is, to deny kids entry to early childhood, to kindergarten and pre-K. So 3 and 4 year olds, I'm thinking 3 and 4 year olds. I mean, we have some students, children who are brilliant, but they're being wasted at home with handheld gadgets, with no guidance, no leadership. So when we put our children in structured environments where they can be taught, they can learn, they can understand more about community together, it builds a strong foundation for building your community, because they understand very early that there is somebody there that cares. There's somebody there that's teaching me. There's somebody there that I can go to, and do something that's going to be wow. Can you imagine telling a 4-year-old, when the 4-year-olds come to you and they singing their ABCs and just learning how to write their names? That is pivotal. And I say, the reason why I say it's pivotal, let me tell you, I was in a hearing about 2 years ago. And this was a hearing to determine whether or not a case should be moved from juvenile court to adult court. And the young man that was being tested, that was being cross-examined, he gave his name, and the lawyer said, could you repeat your name? The stenographer said, could you spell your name? The young man could spell his first name. I shivered in I'm telling you, it hurt me to my core. He could not spell his second name. And this was one of those kids who I knew had some real extenuating circumstances, and he was also exceptional, and he had very limited understanding and comprehension, and they just raked him over the coal. They just raked this poor child over the coal. The parent didn't have the ability to articulate the support for his child, and was subsequently thrown out of the courtroom. But what I'm saying is back to that, when we give our kids an early start, we set them in place for a future that will be progressive and progressive and progressive.
Thank you. I mean, and Jackie, you're right. Of course, for every dollar, there's multiple studies that talk about for every dollar we spend on the front end in early childhood education, we save $7 on all of the social welfare and criminal justice and juvenile justice costs when we don't do that. So thank you for highlighting that point. Tamika, I wonder if you could answer the question about what you see as some of the most important components of the plan, particularly given the state of teachers and teacher capacity financially in this state.
Sure. So one of the components that, of course, as an educator that I support is the development of a plan that recruits and retains high quality educators across the state in a way that allows us to not only have high quality content area specialists in every one of our schools, but also that our educators in the state are well compensated for the labor that they provide. And so I am very much in line with the plan that works to make sure that we are working with our colleges and university systems to develop strong teacher preparation programs, that we are providing areas of support and advancement for our educators who are in the field, like strong professional development, making sure that we have competitive pay on par with going towards the national average and also comparable to our neighbors like in Virginia and in South Carolina. And also making sure that we diversify our education staff as well, because as North Carolina's classrooms continue to be more diverse, we need educators across the spectrum in every part of the state that reflect the diversity of the students that come into their classroom. And all of that is part of the comprehensive plan. I know most of the time we talk about what students gain from the Leandro plan, but also strengthening our education core with our educators here in the state is also part of the comprehensive plan. And we need that in North Carolina because the educator pipeline in our state has been severely broken due to the underfunding of public education in our state.
Yeah, and we know that one of the basic tenets of the Leandro decisions so far is that one of the components to get a sound basic education is that there be an exceptionally competent, professional, dedicated teacher in every classroom and an exceptionally competent, dedicated principal leading those teachers in every school. And education will occur when that happens, and it won't if it doesn't. So thank you for highlighting that. Angus, I wonder if you, as one of the sort of original founders of this lawsuit, and having experienced it as a parent and a school board member, I wonder if you could focus on a particular component that you think is really instrumental or significant in the Leandro plan that's before the court.
Well, thank you. I want everybody in this meeting to understand that the plaintiffs, the Leandro plaintiffs, original plaintiffs, we have a plan. And we do have a plan. Those who oppose the Leandro decision in the Superior Courts, they don't have a plan. I mean, the General Assembly, the state, the General Assembly doesn't have a plan. First, so that's important. We do have a plan, and it's a comprehensive plan, and it was developed by a consortium of educational experts. Now, I believe if you got a plan, you need to work the plan. Now, Rick, you mentioned the first two steps of that plan was the teachers, hiring teachers, and well-trained and certified teachers, and then well-trained and certified principals. That's 1 and 2, step 1 and 2 of the plan. Step 3 of that plan was to get the resources to provide the instructional programs for and let me jump and say that one of the other parts of the plan was that we're talking about early childhood education. And so when I believe in starting the plan, working the plan, and I believe starting the plan just like you start where children start. And children start in pre-K. And that's who we need to serve first. And then we won't have that that school to prison pipeline that Jackie was talking about, that she experienced. And I'm well aware of that, Jackie, as a public defender. You know, the courts were the dumping ground, it seems to be, for a lot of the school's problems because they were not being addressed in the schools. And let me just say this, you know, I mentioned to you that we came off of, prior to Leandro, there was a merger in Robeson County, and we merged 5 school systems. We knew what it was like to have when with the 5 school systems, we had a combination over 15 superintendents and associate superintendents in one of the poorest counties in the state. And each one of those school systems had a superintendent, each one had an associate or an assistant superintendent. So we knew that we had to marshal our resources and consolidate and merge in order to compete with the state. And in order to give our teachers in Robeson County, they had different salaries, all the schools. I mean, the schools had different resources. We had 48 schools. We had 48 schools. So we were able to consolidate some of those schools. Now, what we could not do, what merger did not do, it did not address those inequities of that low wealth counties, like the 5 plaintiffs, which was Hoke and Halifax and Vance and Cumberland and Robeson. It could not address the lack of the ability to meet those matching grant requirements, what we call maintenance of effort requirements. I mean, it could not provide the resources, remote learning. It could not provide the facilities. I remember in Robeson County, we had 2A, 3A, and 4A athletic programs, all in one county. We had fields. We were in the transitions of athletics of track and track fields, and that we had to convert to from yards to meters. So we had pool facilities. We had facilities that we could not even host regional meets. But that's what Leandro was then. And really, that's what it is now.
Well,
lack of facilities, lack of curriculum, lack of teachers. My God, the whole nation now is having a teacher shortage. And here we are sandwiched between Virginia and South Carolina, being the lowest of the 2 states paying teachers. It doesn't look good. Now, we should be in the 2nd year of the plan, but we've not worked the plan, and we do have a plan. And so for me, Leandro, I indicated to you, I have a granddaughter who has a learning disability, and I also have neighbors who have learning disabilities and who have special needs. I also have some gifted and talented neighbors too. But without facilities, without curricula, without principals, without teachers, hey, without bus drivers, you can't even get to school now. So funding is where it's at. Funding is where it's at. We got a plan. Jackie, as you say, give us the money.
Well, thank you. And I just want to highlight a couple points, Angus, that you said, and people don't understand sometimes. You know, 40% of our students in public schools are involved in some extracurricular activity, and often it's those extracurricular activities and experiences that keep them in school, that make them want to learn, that provide them the incentive for us to get them through with a really thorough education. And I think you also pointed out, and Tamika pointed out, and it's worth saying, well, there's a study done, and Chris Nordstrom was part of that, actually the author of a study that looks at the comparative pay And it's sad to say that the starting basic pay of teachers in Virginia and in South Carolina and in Alabama is lower than they are in this state. And well, if they can do it in Alabama, we certainly ought to be able to do it in North Carolina, and we have a constitutional mandate to do that. We've talked about teachers and principals, Matt, and we're looking at the sort of elements of the plan. There's a third component that the Leandro decisions talked about, and that was targeting resources to at-risk kids and at-risk schools and at-risk communities. And I wonder if you talk a little bit about that component of the plan and how that might really affect future generations.
Yeah, I think that's one of the good things that's come out of this case generally is that, we haven't had this sort of comprehensive plan in this way before, but there was some movement within how our funding formulas work to create some pots of money of resources that will be directed more to at-risk students, like the disadvantaged student supplemental fund. So some of the mechanisms that we would use to make sure funding gets to students whose rights have been most violated have been developed as a result of this case. So I don't want to be too down on it that nothing's ever come from it. Problem is that you have to have this comprehensive plan because it's just what's the way education works now that I'm a parent. I know as soon as I figure out one thing, they move to the next phase and I haven't figured that one out yet. And so if you only take care of one of those things, it's not going to work. You have to be on it at every single stage in a child's education. And that's what the plan does. But I've always been struck by how much of it is about it's all about people. Education funding, when we talk about resources, is all about people. That's what's expensive. A person's salary costs a lot more than a textbook. And that's where we've really lost a lot over the past decade in North Carolina. So when you look at the resources that would be driven to try to localize it, looking at Hoke County, if the plan were adopted, and so a lot of the resources would be going to lower wealth counties like the original counties in the case. And they would get additional resources in the form of a lot of different positions. They would get 126 more additional teachers, 60 teacher assistants, 7 school psychologists, 22 school counselors, 25 social workers, 11 nurses, 5 bus drivers. So these are the things that seem to be coming up and working with community groups. The buses aren't running on time, or the rides are forever. People have kids who need medications in school, and there's a nurse who's only there, less than half of the days. So it's really, the plan, I think, is getting at a lot of the personnel shortages and jobs, and the fact, and they're located disproportionately in areas that have been historically marginalized. So, and I don't know if that's been held up enough about what a game changer that would be for communities. I think in a lot of communities, the best thing going and a real anchor of the community is the local public school. This sort of infusion of additional jobs into communities across the state, particularly in rural areas that have struggled to attract jobs in recent years or really lost jobs. This could be an unbelievable influx of resources. I mean, so it's enough that it would be what it would do for our state's children and what that means for our state's future, but just in the present to have this many jobs be put into our communities and have them be directed to those communities that need them most would just be a huge game changer. And again, it would address the problems that we're hearing time and again people are most concerned about in terms of the lack of personnel in schools across the state.
Thanks, Matt. And I think you also highlight the fact that, and all of our speakers so far have highlighted the fact that there's only one institution in this country that has held our people together as one nation under one flag with a common set of values, and it's public education. And Tamika spoke to that in her way as well when she was talking. And all of you have highlighted different components of the plan, from early childhood education through teacher and principal certification and preparation and pay, into the at-risk components that will be immensely helped. I wonder if you had, and Angus, you were talking about this, and I'll turn back to you to start. What do we say to opponents of the plan who say, well, money isn't everything? What's the, and some are saying that and have said it all along, that money isn't going to solve the problems of public education. How do you react to that?
Well, first of all, lack of it won't solve the problem. I can tell you that. But again, I want to reiterate, we have a plan. The other side, they don't have a plan. And so, and the plan was developed by experts, of educators, of parents who had children in these schools or neglected schools, of citizens. And so, and it took a couple of years or so, at least a year or so, to develop the plan. The plan was submitted to the court, the lower court. And, you know, I'm an attorney, and Rick, you are, Matt, you are. And I mean, you know, if you got something, you need to present it. We have a plan. So I think it's important as advocates, as to those who are participating in this meeting, look at the plan and feel good that we have a plan. And so, and the other side doesn't. Now, money is necessary. I mean, it sort of speaks to me to itself of what's happening now. We have teachers retiring. We have teachers. We have people who don't want to go into the teaching profession. Again, we're competing with our sister states and other states in trying to hire teachers. We didn't fund the first year of the Leandro plan. We're in the second year of the Leandro plan, and Matt can tell us a little bit about the money. I think it's about, I mean, you know, we're somewhere around 1.7 million. You know, we need another 7 million for the second year of the plan, but it takes money. There's not much you can't do without it. I can tell you that. It's pretty simple to me. And it's pretty simple to the legislature. I mean, if they can hoard $6 billion, I mean, you know, and we've got a surplus. We had a surplus of some $6 billion, and they've used some of that to address education. But again, work the plan.
Well, you know, Angus, you remind me of the saying that I've heard, and I tend to agree with, that all the people who say, well, money won't solve the problem are the people who have the money. And so there's an interesting question David Scott has posed, and I'd like Matt, if you don't mind sort of answering it, but that is if the Leandro plan is a constitutional mandate, why are we still debating it? And what's really at stake in the court decision next week?
Wish I knew the answer to why we're still debating it. I mean, I think what's normally happened when these types of cases happen in other states is political pressure builds on the legislature because investing in public education is generally popular. And when you start to shine a light on your system the way we have with things like the WestEd report, and you see where all the inadequacies are and the inequities, and you're given a plan to do something about it, it's generally unpopular to just sit on that and do nothing. So most places, there's been that reaction. I do think that there has been a coordinated, you know, and I did not believe this when I first started doing this work 10 years ago, that such a thing was possible, that there could be an actual sort of an attack on public education when we've got such a huge percentage of us are connected to the public education system in some way. We either went to it, or our kids went to it, or we have spouses and work in the systems. So I never believed that could be possible, but it seems clear when you just look at all of the policies and things that have happened over the past decade or so, with the increased reliance on private school vouchers, privatization generally in the charter school system, the sort of encouragement by our public education officials that for people to homeschool their children. And we've seen the numbers decline of people who are, and a pandemic was sort of a perfect storm on top of all of that, where, and then we look at the critical race theory type of stuff, or the attacks on teaching about our racial history of racial discrimination, or masking debates, all of it. comes down to, I think, a lack of belief in the public education system on the part of a lot of our lawmakers that I think is not in line with where our citizens are. I think most people in North Carolina do believe in the public education system and believe in their public schools and want to invest in them. So there just seems to be this gap between our representation and the people of our state on this particular issue that's been pretty infuriating.
I wonder if you turn for a minute, and then I've got questions for a couple of the other panelists from our guests and participants to the idea of exactly what the issue is that's pending before the court on next Wednesday.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the question is really, what is the impact of the most recent 2-year budget on the funding that was determined as needed to comply with years 2 and 3 of the comprehensive remedial plan? So, you know, there was back and forth in the trial court about, you know, the barrier to implementing this plan that was developed was repeatedly found to be lack of funding from the legislature. That's how it kind of escalated to this point. Some elements of the plan have been funded a little less than probably half over that 2-year period, and a lot of it is concentrated into things that are not well targeted to at-risk students. A lot of it goes into teacher pay and things like that that are important, but still not really moving the needle in a way that's actually going to deal with the pipeline issues and the way our compensation stacks up compared to other professions. And of course, with inflation, these sort of slight increases in teacher pay were actually more like cuts in terms of the actual, you know, earning power of teachers. So I think there's more than years 2 and 3 at stake, though. It's going to really set the tone for a lot of the big investments and the things that are going to really be felt more in schools, I think, come in the later years of the 8-year plan. And so the ruling that the court comes out with is going to be really important for establishing, you know, what's going to happen for the remainder beyond years 2 and 3 of the plan for how they go about overseeing the implementation of the plan.
Yeah, Angus.
May I interject? And I know we're lawyers, but and I don't want to oversimplify things, but we talk about the constitutional dimensions, and we understand it perhaps as lawyers, but the court will decide basically whether one of the main issues is whether they can order the state, the General Assembly, to come up with the money to fund the plan.
That's right.
That's one of the major issues, whether they have the courts have the power to even do that. Now, you know, I was taught in law school, if there's an injury, then there's a remedy. And if you didn't do what you were supposed to do, that's what courts are for. To order you to do what you didn't do. And so that's from but all the, yeah. But there's a political dimension of this, you all.
No,
that's go vote. Thank you.
Well, I want to follow up on that, and then I want to ask Tamika and Jackie a question that's in the chat as well. But I mean, this is not a case where it's two private people suing each other in court. The government has been sued saying that the state was not meeting its constitutional obligation to its children under the state constitution. The governor and the executive branch of government have consented and agreed that, in fact, North Carolina has been operating an unconstitutional system for 25 years. Not only did they agree, but under the study that was funded, as Mr. Thompson talked about, there was a comprehensive, perhaps the best school finance plan in the nation that was put together that set out, these are the things that need to happen over the next 6 to 8 years in North Carolina to meet the constitutional minimum. And here's how much it's going to cost. And here's what you've got to do. And the governor and the state board of education have consented to that plan, agreed that it's a viable plan, and we have the money in the House to fund the plan. There is almost a $6 billion set of reserves at the General Assembly in various categories, and that's more than would take to fund the 8 years of the plan. So this should have no real effect on income and taxes, which was another question. And now the question is whether you can have a constitutional violation that the state agrees exists, that the state agrees to a remedy to, but the state legislature refuses to do the remedy that is ordered to make it whole. And no other litigant would be able to say, no, I don't want to do that. And this is a question of whether the court and the Constitution still have meaning and authority in this state to be able to remedy the constitutional violations of the entire public that are at stake in the case. So I appreciate you bringing that to light, which leads very much, Jackie and Tamika, to the questions, and several of them asked. So how do we best, as people who are participating in this call, how are they best served as ways to advocate for this, not only in the next week before the court hearing, but in the weeks thereafter, and quite frankly, in the years thereafter, so that this whole plan is implemented, funded, and works? And I'll let you two decide which one wants to go first.
I will let Miss Jackie go first.
Thank you, baby. You just bring it on in or bring it home, okay? Well, first and foremost, you know, I really think it's just so ridiculous that, you know, if I ride down the street and I break the law, if I'm speeding or whatever, and I go to court and the court sanctions me, then I'm duty bound to honor that sanction. Because if I don't honor that sanction, then there are consequences for me, even if it's being locked up, you know, that's it, contempt of court. So it's staggering that we don't have that option, you know, as citizens, when we know that it has been, a case has been proven, a case has been won, and yet the defendants refuse to pay the plaintiff restitution. You know, in juvenile service, you don't pay restitution, you go back to court. And if you refuse, then you get locked up. So in the humanistic part of this and the humanitarian part of this, I think as a community of people and a community of voters, that we petition the courts even the more to lock these people up, lock them up. And you know, you who have money can easily say, we don't need the money. But if you've never missed a meal, and if you've never had inadequate education, you don't know what the people are suffering from. And you don't know what the children are suffering and missing, but you do know. You do know. And as civic-minded people, I think it's important that we continue to say, you're not doing your job, so let's start removing these folks out of office who are not doing their job. Let's start removing them. And what we have to do is this thing it's not just one side versus the other. It's straight across the line. Do you care about the health, the life, the education, and well-being of children who are going to lead this community, your community, and other communities in the next 5, 10, 20 years?
Well,
where will we be?
Yeah, I mean, Jackie, you've led it. I'm going to switch you. You've highlighted exactly right. Education of our children is not a Republican or a Democratic principle. It's not a conservative or liberal principle. It is a basic element of being human beings wanting the best for our state. And I'm going to turn it to Tamika for the last word of the day to talk, because part of your role is advocating often at the General Assembly. What should people do over the next several weeks, particularly that would be most appropriate and most helpful to advocate for this?
Yes, and so I appreciate having these final minutes to share. So I think it's really important that everybody who is tuned in, who is listening to this webinar, take stock of a couple of things. One, I challenge you to text or email 5 people that you know in your community, because part of the reason why there isn't that sort of political pressure around Leandro is because not enough people in our communities are aware of what is happening around this particular legal case. We talk about it a lot in our education circles, and I know that, of course, all of the people here at the Justice Center have been doing really great outreach in lots of counties, but still not enough people know about it. So I challenge you to visit the website, text 5 people that you know, and ask them, do they know, have they heard about Leandro? Do they know who Leandro is and why it's important to them? The second thing I encourage people to do is to talk to your legislator. Many of our constituents in our communities don't actually engage on a regular basis with the people that are elected to represent them. And if they are going to the General Assembly and doing one thing and then coming back to your community and saying another, there's a discrepancy between what the people want and what the legislators want. And the legislators should always represent the will of the people, and the people need high quality public schools, and Leandro does that. And so you have to have the conversation with your legislature. It's also just really, really critically important that people know, as Ms. Jackie said, Leandro is not just an economic issue. It is not just an equity issue. It is not just a constitutional issue, obligation to the students of our state. It is a moral issue. Do we actually believe in the success and well-being of every single child in this state, no matter where they come from, no matter how they identify, no matter their background, no matter their income level, no matter their level of ability? If we don't value our children, then we will continue to be in this cycle where we are asking people to do the bare minimum, which is give them the tools and the resources to have a sound basic education at minimum, because really what they deserve is a high quality public education. And so we are asking everybody to do the work that's necessary in order to make sure that we are making positive changes for our students. But it can't just be the people on this call, and it can't just be the teachers, and it can't just be the lawyers. It has to be all of us working in concert with one another. And so in NCAE, we always say that we always have a meeting when we leave you with stuff to do. And it is your task now as the audience to go tell somebody and bring somebody along to take action on Leandro.
What a great way to end this very rich and deep conversation with a call to action and what we can do. Thank you, Tamika. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Angus. Thank you, Matt, for all that you do and for being with us and sharing your inspiration and your words of action with everyone. Sarah?
Yeah, and I just want to extend my appreciation to all of our panelists. We are truly leading with Leandro, and we are lifting up the urgent need for lawmakers to keep that promise to our children to fully fund Leandro. There is a legislative solution today if they were serious about remedying the harm of these inequities. And just like Tamika, I'm going to put everybody to work. I'm going to drop in the chat our events page at Every Child NC. All of the leaders that you learned from today are going to be leading actions throughout the week and around the oral argument starting next Wednesday at the North Carolina Supreme Court. We've got a rally for Every Child where we're going to be celebrating all that's possible when we invest in our children. That's going to be in Raleigh at Halifax Mall from 10 to noon. You're going to hear from Tamika. You're going to hear from Mr. Thompson. I dropped in the chat. We've got a fantastic virtual film screening Monday night, uplifting, as Tamika reminded us, it's a moral imperative, right? It is not only the constitutional, the legal, the right thing to do. It is who we are as North Carolinians. We care about our children. We invest in every community. And this is really how we demonstrate that commitment. Then we're going to be at the Supreme Court on Wednesday. We're going to have a fantastic opening press conference. Mr. Thompson's going to make the trip back up from Robinson. We're going to be joined by other leaders in our movement, and then we'll be joined by leaders from the faith community for a prayer vigil while the hearing is going on. And then Every Child NC is going to be the place to be for all of your post-hearing questions. We're going to have a Zoom meeting with the lawyers from Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, Reverend Mack from NAACP Charlotte, and Marcus Bass is going to be holding down that conversation. Look to our events page, which will be updated tomorrow for all of those events. And I do just want to take a moment here, if you'll allow me. I want to lift up the good work of Every Child NC and our team at the Education and Law Project. We are the anchor organization to the statewide community-led coalition, meaning all of the funding that supports our partner support fund, our staffing, our communications, our resources, our staff time, right? That's all coming from the Justice Center. And we are appreciative for folks who contribute in whatever way they can, your time, your energy, and your dollars, because this work is so incredibly important, and it must continue, because the more that opponents of Leandro shrink our budget, the more they try to silence our voices and erase our identities, the more we have to grow this movement, and we have to invest in our children, and we have to stand alongside one another, and bring more people into this fight. So with that, I'll kick it back to Rick to close us out, and we thank everybody for being here today.
Thank you, Sarah. And I want to thank all of our panelists and everyone who joined us today. And just remember that we are at an historic moment in this case. And what the court does will set the standard for generations to come for public education. So the fight is now, the fight is immediate. And the victory, though, will eventually be for all North Carolina's children. So thank you for being with us. Have a wonderful rest of your week and have a great weekend, everybody. Hope to see you at one of the events. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye.